All right. Terry is Harry. That's right. And no, I'm not talking about you, Dr. Bowen, I'm sorry. Terry is Harry. I don't think there are 3 words that I regret saying more than those 3 right there. Terry is Harry. So, good morning. This morning we'll be looking at James chapter 3, looking at verses 1 through 12. So if you want to flip there in your Bibles, that'd be great. I'll have the verses up on the screen, but if you want to follow along, that'd be cool too. So when I was in the 6th grade, I started to play lacrosse. And I know lacrosse isn't a super big sport around here, but back where I'm from in the East Coast, it's like big deal. Really cool sport. I really miss playing it. But I started playing it 6th grade, and then from 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade, I wasn't very good. And so how my school did it, we had an A team and a B team for lacrosse. And you could guess what team I was on. I was on the B team. And so how we split it up, the A team, they were like the hand-picked players that were really good, and they would all get put on the A team. And then everyone else kind of just got pushed over to the B team because they didn't really matter. So I was on the B team my first 3 years, but it was still fun. I still enjoyed it. But then in the 9th grade, everything changed. And I got an opportunity to play alongside with those who were on the A team. And so like my whole life changed. These were my teammates now, and they became my friends. And so you know how it works in high school, specifically in the 9th grade, whenever you're going in. You're kind of just scared. You're at the bottom of the totem pole, and you kind of just don't want to get made fun of. You kind of just don't want to look stupid, so you want to fit in somewhere. Especially at my high school, it was pretty big. My graduating class was about like 800, and so it was a bigger school. So it's kind of freaky. And so I kind of wanted to fit in somewhere. And so I looked at this group of lacrosse players, and I said, I'm going to be friends with them. And so I decided I'm going to fit in with them. And so I become friends with these lacrosse players, and they become my identity. Like, this is who I am now. I'm known as a lacrosse player. This is me. Well, all is well. I'm in the 9th grade. I'm fitting in. All is good. I'm great. I'm doing great. And then there was this kid, and this kid's name was Kip. And Kip was a little bit of an outcast. He didn't really take the initiative like I did, and he didn't really try to fit in with a group. And so he was kind of a loner. And so one day, Kip kind of looked at our group and kind of said, hey, these guys are pretty cool. I think I want to be friends with them. And so he decides to join our group. But it was a little weird because Kip didn't play lacrosse, and so he kind of just didn't fit in naturally. And so there's our group. There's like 20 of us total. There's 19 lacrosse players, and then Kip. And so another thing that I want to add about this is this group of people that I was friends with, they weren't the greatest people. They were a little toxic. There was a lot of mocking and making fun of, and naturally Kip was the scapegoat because he didn't really fit in to begin with. He didn't play lacrosse, and he was a little bit of a smaller kid, and he was kind of annoying. And so naturally, he just got made fun of a lot. He got the short end of the stick. And I did my fair share of mocking, of bullying, essentially what it was. And so I did that. I fired back. I just, you know how it works when you're in that group of guys, and I guess specifically the guys would know about this. You're kind of just vying for power. There's a social hierarchy within a group, and you got to try to not be the bottom guy. You got to be the top dog. And so you're constantly just fighting for that. And I kind of just fell for that because I thought that would fulfill me. Well, I did my fair share of mocking, and specifically at Kip. But then one day, Kip kind of got fed up with this. And he looked at me and he said, Tanner's not that much bigger than me. I could probably take him. I'm not intimidated by him. I'm not doing this anymore. And so he started firing back at me. So before that, I was just mocking him, making fun of him constantly, and he would just take it. But now he starts firing back. And I'm just like, this isn't how this works. This is not supposed to happen. And so then we just kept doing this, firing back and forth for a while, and the animosity just kind of grew and grew and grew. And we would just constantly just mock each other, make fun of each other, tear each other down. And then one day, I figured out that Kip's mom's name is Terry. And so I did what any other 9th grade punk kid would do, and I created a rhyme. Simple little rhyme. Terry is Harry. And oh man, did the guys love that. They ate it up, and they would say it all the time. And oh man, did Kip hate it. We would write it on books, on chalkboards, dry erase boards. We would say it all day, every day. Terry is Harry, and he hated it. And so the animosity grew even quicker after that. And then, one day, he decided to steal my seat at the lunch table. And that kind of did it for me. I snapped. And so I sat my lunch down, and I looked at him in this cafeteria in front of like 200 people, and I punch him. And I punch him, and I punch him again. And I keep punching him until the principal runs over and makes me stop. And I got suspended. But that's far from the worst part of the consequences that I would face. You see, Kip knew that I went to church. He knew that my dad was a pastor. What kind of message does that send to him about Jesus? And the hundreds of people that all witnessed me punch this kid, they're all sitting there, they're all just like, they knew that I was a Christian. They knew that I went to church. What kind of message does that send to all of them about Jesus? I had messed up big time. And it all started with Terry is Harry. Our words have a lot of power, and our tongues can be a dangerous weapon if we aren't careful and if we don't know how to control them. And our passage this morning talks about this issue of taming the tongue, how much power our tongue really has, and how much we need to realize that the words we say have power behind them. So James is writing to the early church here, and most scholars believe that this was written about 20 years or so after the life of Jesus. And he was reminding the Christians that are scattered all around the region that they need to be living out what they said they believed. These Christians are being persecuted and are under great pressure from society. And apparently the people that James is writing to had some serious problems controlling their tongue under all this pressure, because it's a theme that's repeated all throughout his letter. And so what I want to tell you today, what I want you to go home with, is that we must not let our tongues control us. We must control our tongues. So let's see what James has to say about this, looking at our text this morning, starting in verse 1 of chapter 3. Not many of you should become teachers, my fellow believers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. So James first starts off this subject of taming the tongue with a warning to teachers. So in the first century, being a teacher was a big deal. It was a big responsibility. Teachers in the first century had the important task of teaching Christian doctrine. And so a special authority and prestige came along with this title of being a teacher. And so people, naturally, just wanting to benefit themselves, would say, I want to be a teacher. I want to be like that. And so all these people were wanting to become teachers just because they wanted the prestige and the honor that came with it. And James is kind of warning them like, hey, not all of you should be teachers. He warns them that teachers are judged more strictly by what they say. Not all of you are meant to be teachers. Let's move on, looking at verse 2. We all stumble in many ways. Anyone who is never at fault in what they say is perfect, able to keep their whole body in check. Well, there you go. If you're perfect, if you've never harmed anyone with the words you've said, this isn't for you. You're good. You can check out, fall asleep, you're all right. But James says that we all stumble in many ways. We all struggle with this issue of taming our tongue. Now, in the next 3 verses, James will talk about how destructive our words can be. He gives us 3 little examples about how something so small, something seemingly harmless, can have devastating results. Verse 3. When we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. You can just put a little 4 or 5 inch piece of metal in a horse's mouth, and you can control this huge, massive animal and steer it wherever you want it to go, just with this little piece of metal. Verse 4. Or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. Out in the open sea, big ships fight the winds and the waves, but just with a small little rudder, the pilot can steer the ship wherever it wants it to go. Verse 5, likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by just a small spark. Smokey Bear's been telling us that our whole lives. Just a small little spark can set a whole forest on fire. The point James is making with the bit and the rudder with the spark is how something so small like the tongue can have such an enormous and damaging power to do great amounts of damage to the very people that Jesus gave his life for. So this fits right into my first point. Our tongues hold great power for evil. Proverbs 18:21 says, "The tongue has the power of life and death." There's no question that our tongues hold great power, but we decide whether we use that power for good or for evil. We all have seen how the power of words can bring life or death all the time in relationships and friendships. I've seen how the words can bring life or death into the soul of a child or the people that we work with. Every single one of us can vividly remember some of the damaging words that were said to us in our lives. Some of you remember a parent saying something like, "I never should have had you. You were the biggest mistake I ever made." Or a broken relationship. "I never really loved you." Words from a teacher or coach or boss. And once those words come out, they are so hard to put back in. And many of us have a hard time erasing them from our memory. And we just kind of relive that moment over and over and over. And it just kills us. That friend group that I had in the 9th grade, I still remember the hurtful and awful things that they said to me. These were still probably to this day some of the worst people that I'd ever met. They were pretty toxic, pretty awful. It was just day in, day out, constantly mocking, making fun of, and it was awful. And I remember in gym class in the 10th grade when Sean told me that I was a scrawny little weakling, and he made me feel insecure and worthless. I remember when I caught John talking behind my back in the 11th grade to all my friends. That stung. And I remember back when I was like 7 or 8 years old when the neighborhood bully Megan told me that nobody wanted to be my friend and that I was a loser. That was like 12 years ago. I still remember that. These things stick. They affect us. Were you ever told by your mom, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all? I think it's a pretty good principle. We must not let our tongues control us. We must control our tongues. Our tongues have the power to destroy and hurt and tear down. But our tongues also have the power to bring light and love and acceptance. We can lift people up. So our tongues hold great power for evil, but they also hold great power for good. Proverbs 12:25 says, "Life weighs a person down, but loving words brings back hope." We can comfort others with words of love, with words of affirmation, with words of encouragement. Are any of you familiar with the band Brother Moses? Yeah. I'm a pretty big fan of Brother Moses. And they recently just came out with a new album. And in that album, they have this new song called Ache. And Ache's a really good song. I'm a big fan. And the song is about the lead singer, James, and how he has a broken relationship with his father. And he kind of never really got to know his father, and he never really told him how much he meant to him. And the song Ache is how much he aches for his father's love and affection. The song says, "I ache for you. I won't let you keep yourself from me." He says, "I want it bad, and I want you there. I won't let you keep yourself from me." He just wants to hear those 3 little words, "I love you." Isn't it crazy how much weight just those 3 simple words hold? I love you. I vividly remember so many of the life-changing words that others have said to me that have had a profound effect on me. I remember the first time someone told me, "Hey, you're a good leader," or "Hey, God used you in my life." I even remember the first time someone told me, "Wow, you're really tall." No, that didn't happen. I wish. But I remember when I graduated high school, I had a graduation party, and I invited just like the most important people in my life that had affected me and had influenced me, and it was special to see them all there. And I remember I had a guest book sitting there on the table, and you know how it works. You just kind of walk in and you write something down, a little congrats, little note, nice little note. And didn't really think much of it, but after the party, I walked up to this book, and I just started reading some of the things that people had wrote, and I just remember just becoming so overcome with emotion. I just started to cry just while I was reading this book. And just some of the things that people wrote. Like I remember my foreign exchange student, Leo from Chile. And he had wrote that even though he was in the United States only for a few months, that he would remember and cherish our friendship for the rest of his life. I remember Tori. She's just an 8-year-old little girl. And she wrote me a handwritten letter about how much I meant to her. Just this 8-year-old little girl. That meant so much. These things were so special. Did you know that there's a suicide every 40 seconds? 40 seconds. Your tongue holds so much power. And sometimes that means life or death. You decide whether you use the power of your tongue for tearing people down or for lifting people up, to give them life and hope. Sometimes the most quiet people are the ones that need help the most. You can be that person, but it's your choice. Have you seen the movie Wonder? Great movie. The movie's about a boy named August Pullman who has this rare facial deformity. And so for his whole life, he was homeschooled, but for the start of middle school, he decided he wanted to try out public school. And so he was a little nervous at first, just how the kids would react. And he got bullied at first, and he didn't really make any friends. But then he meets this kid named Jack Will. And through some ups and downs, they become best friends. And it changes his whole outlook on life. It changes his whole life just because this one kid decided to be his friend. I think this movie is so powerful because it shows us how powerful our words can be. You get to choose whether you use your words for evil or for good. Proverbs 18:2 says, "Words kill, words give life. Either poison or fruit, you decide." We must not let our tongues control us. We must control our tongues. So let's finish up looking back at our text, picking up in verse 6. The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. All kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind, but no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. Can both fresh water and salt water flow from the same spring? My brothers and sisters, can a fig tree bear olives or a grapevine bear figs? Neither can a salt spring produce fresh water. And I know the temptation for all of us this morning is to just say, oh, come on, they're just words. Isn't James overreacting here? Like, they're just words. You can get over it. It's not a big deal. Well, James says that we're dealing with something a lot deeper here than just our tongues. He says the issue is rooted deep inside of us. James is saying that the root of our problem with the tongue is actually a problem of the heart. He's trying to point out that it is not just a matter of cleaning up your words. You can't just throw in a piece of Orbit gum and just call it a day. Like, it's more than that. It's a problem of your heart. Matthew 12:34-35 says, "For out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. The good man brings good things out of the good stored up in him, and the evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in him." And this brings me to my final point. At the heart of our speech problem is a problem of the heart. What comes out of your mouth is an indication of what's really going on inside of your heart. Jesus taught that what comes out of your mouth is an indication of what's in your heart. Our tongues give us away. I ended up making fun of Kip because of all the filth that I had built up inside of me. The friend group that I associated with were some of the most horrible people I met, like I said. Each and every one of them had so much filth built up inside of them. And after being around them each and every day, that starts to affect you. And that filth started to build up inside of me. And it started to just build and build and build over time until I just exploded. And I had so much filth inside of me afterwards, I didn't even apologize. I decided to embrace my actions. Like, oh man, I'm a tough guy now. I got into a fight. Don't mess with me. Man, and I think that's so funny because remember when the principal came over, he ran over and took me to his office and he sat me down and I just started crying. I just started bawling, man. I didn't know what to do. I just kind of started freaking out like, what did I just do? I had never been in trouble before. I've never been in the principal's office before. I just punched this kid. Who am I? I think I started crying because I didn't even recognize myself anymore, because I had so much filth built up inside of me. I didn't even know who I was. Show me someone who speaks with overly critical words all the time, and I'll show you someone who is full of bitterness and resentment and even hate inside their heart. Show me someone who speaks with dishonest words, and I'll show you someone with a deceitful or insecure heart. Show me someone who speaks with harsh words, and I'll show you someone who's become calloused in their heart. Out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. At the heart of our speech problem is a problem of the heart. The church in James' day was having some issues with this. People not being able to tame their tongue, and this affected the unity of the church. They were speaking hateful words to each other. They're being divided. And James is saying, hey, Jesus didn't die for you to just hate on your brothers and sisters. Jesus calls us to be unified. How can we share the love of Christ to those on the outside of the church when we can't even do that to ourselves, those on the inside? Jesus calls us to be unified. He died for you on that cross, for you to love others, to give people hope, so you could have the opportunity to give eternal life to those who have not yet heard it. So how are we doing with this? How are we, the community of Ozark Christian College, doing with taming our tongues? Are we always lifting each other up? Or do we sometimes slip and spite others? Whenever there's just that weird kid, you just want to say something to get a good laugh out of your friends. You have no idea the damage that you're causing to that person. You have no idea. Are you only concerned with yourself? Are you only concerned with tearing people down? What are you storing up? Because what you pour in is what you'll live out. What are you taking in these days? Is it negative gossip from people you spend time with, or angry, hate-filled people? Trashy content from that one show that you watch that's kind of borderline, not okay to watch, but you just watch it anyways. What are you filling your soul with these days? If you want nourishing speech and godly stuff to come out of your mouth, you need to be filling your heart and mind with godly and nourishing things. Again, verse 10 says, out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. We must not let our tongues control us. We must control our tongues. So I have a good friend. His name's Hunter. And Hunter went to a mixed inner-city school for elementary school. And one day he's just running around being his obnoxious first-grade self, just screaming, having a good time. And class is about to start, so he sits down, and he's still screaming, just yelling, being annoying, obnoxious. And he sits next to this girl named LaRasha. And LaRasha is kind of getting fed up with him. And so she looks at him. She goes, hey, shut up, cornball. And Hunter is just taken back at the audacity of LaRasha. She would say such a thing. And so for the rest of that day, he just racks his little mind trying to come up with a better comeback, something to get back at her with. So he thinks, and he comes up with something. And oh man, this is going to be good. And he can't wait to get to class the next day. And so he walks into class, and he's confident. He's ready. He walks in, and he sits down next to LaRasha. Right when class is about to start, the teacher's handing out papers, and she hands papers to LaRasha, and she turns to give Hunter a paper, and Hunter looks her dead in the eyes. And she says, hey, give me that piece of paper, Cocoa Puff. Oh. So on his way to the principal's office, he kind of thought through what he had said, and probably wasn't the best choice of words. But it'd be nice if the worst thing someone could call us is cornball or Cocoa Puff. That's just not how it works. It's average that the average person speaks 16,000 words a day. That's 16,000 words for you to spew hate and tear people down, or 16,000 words to lift people up and give them hope and love. You have 16,000 words today. How are you going to use your words? Let's pray. Lord, I pray that we can learn to tame our tongues a little better. I think that's something everyone struggles with, and it's something that just causes so much harm and damage, something that seems so harmless, but just forgive us when we stumble. Lord, I pray for this class and everyone in it, and that we can continue to just spur each other on and just share love to others, especially those outside the church. your name I pray. Amen.